Let's go to Glenn Ignacio. He's a military expert, retired Air Force Special Operations Commander. He joins us now to talk some more about what's going on. Glenn, thanks for your time. Would you say Israel going into Rafah to get the hostages is actually the start of the incursion here?
I think it happened a little bit around the same time. So supposedly they've known about where the location was, but it wasn't the appropriate time to move for about 2 weeks. So that's definitely one part of this. The second part is as they move from Khan Yunis down into Rafah, this is where everybody's compressed. So they feel that is their last shot to clear out Hamas, but they're just bombing. May be particularly a way you prepare the battlefield, but it doesn't matter unless you have soldiers going in and clearing that area. So those two activities, why they may be sort of tied together in timing, are still two separate entities in themselves.
Okay, so let's take a look at a quick graphic here. The current population of Gaza is estimated to be about 1.4 million people. Of course, as we said, a lot of people fled here to the border of Egypt to get away from all the bombing that was happening, well, everywhere else. Before all of this, the population there was about 300,000. So those people are crammed into that corner. What do you do with these people? If Israel is saying they need to leave, where do they go? Is the north safer for them now, even though there is no infrastructure?
Well, great points. There really isn't. A lot of that has been destroyed. So now this is what Israel has said. So that if you even look at the satellite pictures, you wouldn't believe from a month ago to present day of how many people are crammed into this area. So what Israel is saying is, hey, we want you now to move sort of to the north, or even a safer area is close to the coastline where there's an actual road that's supposed to be the primary mechanism of transportation. The issue is on the execution and the planning and coordinating on the Israeli side. There's many times that they've said for these folks to move, but then they were attacking and or bombing. So that's a command and control issue, and that's also a safety issue. So they really don't have a place to move. There's a lot of panic. But let's get into something that's even more important, is for 40 or 50 years, there's been sort of a truce since the Carter administration, the U.S. Carter administration, between Egypt and Israel. Now, Egypt stated if the Palestinians get so afraid and start climbing over the walls and getting into the Sinai Peninsula in any way, that peace, that treaty, that agreement will come to an end. So there's a lot more bigger actions at play here versus just in Gaza. But these people really need a place to go.
Okay, so if Egypt does end up doing that because it does not want to deal with a flood of refugees at this point as well, how do things change? What tilts?
Great question. So we've seen that Jordan said, hey, we're not going to deal with any of the refugees. Egypt says not at all, and this is what's going to happen. Is it really becomes open now? Does that mean Egypt and Israel is going to go to war or have any conflict? I doubt it, but it's definitely going to raise the stakes where there could be a tremendous amount of impact from sanctions or who knows what else. But the issue is this is the only point from Egypt into that Rafah gate, to get the humanitarian aid in. So Egypt really has to be on the side of supporting Israel and supporting the Palestinians and getting that help in. So what would happen? Not quite sure, but it's a delicate time that would put more instability in the Middle East.
There are calls for the U.S. and others to stop supplying weapons to Israel. Would that have the desired effect of stopping a Rafah invasion?
I don't think so. And the reason for it is that Israel has a significant amount of both current and reserve weapons, forces, etc., to take this particular entity on. So the long-term plan or the long-term engagement, over a month or so, it's something that they would probably depend on, the foreign aid more. But this wouldn't stop what's going on in Rafah. As we mentioned, they've done strikes and they were able to get the 2 hostages out and they lost 2 soldiers on the path. But just because they strike those areas, they still have to go through and clear that area of Hamas and or weapon storages and so forth. So bombing doesn't do anything. You still have to have that ground presence. And that's where the concern is what's going to happen with these civilians.
It's not clear to me, though, how they clear for Hamas militants if you don't know what they look like. They're clearly not wearing uniforms. They're trying to mix in with the public whenever they can. So how do they even know who they're going after and who they're bringing back?
You're absolutely right, and I remember we talked about this some time ago. Is that you're right? The civilian population and the Hamas militants look the same. So one of the things that you could really say, and this is one thing about Netanyahu saying, "I'm going to destroy Hamas." Well, their infrastructure and their capability to launch attacks against Israel, sure, you can get those weapons, destroy them, and those that are attacking you, you can attack. That's clear. But to say that you're going to completely eliminate Hamas when you really don't know who's who, that's not plausible. It's not possible. So destroying their infrastructure and their capability to launch something against Israel, yes. But being able to eliminate completely as far as personnel and militants, not plausible. So they have to put people on the ground to go through these areas. And they found the two hostages actually in an apartment, not in the tunnels, which people originally thought.
So, Glenn, Israel also has to report back to the International Court on ways it's trying to avoid killing civilians. I mean, how do they do that? Would it be enough for them to say, we have asked them to leave?
Yeah, so it is a interesting situation. So they have provided instructions and a warning on phones and leaflets and so forth. So that is one of the things that is a check mark you have to do to say you're not intentionally trying to strike and kill people. So they have done that. But the thing is have they set up the appropriate areas and the mechanisms for them to get out? Probably not. So that's where it's interesting, is that they sort of check off the requirement, but the actual ability to carry out military actions without hurting civilians, it's not their intent, but it is happening, and it's happening too often. So it's a very delicate way between reality and the legality of what they're doing. So I hope that that makes sense.
Yeah. They were also asked, however, to make sure the aid gets to people in dire need. And if they are pushing it to Rafah, where that border is, and the aid comes through, that jeopardizes the aid.
Yeah, yes, absolutely. I think right now there's only about 50 trucks that are getting in through each day, and it used to be like close to 500 trucks of supplies getting in each day. But you're absolutely right. If you look at it, that's like a million people compressed into such a tiny area. There's tents and everything, which you would normally see in like a refugee camp. So any kind of action right there is going to displace them, or the possibility of them being hurt from strikes. It's really condensed area. So they really have their hands full of how do you safely get them away, but be able to take care of Hamas if Hamas is truly the enemy. That is a delicate and a complex problem that I don't see how they're going to be able to fix in a very short time.
Glenn Ignazio, good to have you on this, sir. Thanks very much for sharing your time. I appreciate it.
Nice to see you.